Hello, I'm Sean Lambert, and welcome to War for America. This is the entire American Revolutionary War, and we're going to be playing the largest scenario in this game. This episode is going to be a little bit of a teaching scenario, but we'll get into more in-depth gameplay as the series goes on. Now, I do have some surprises in store for you that I'm really excited for you to see. So I can't wait to get into it. But before that, I want to set the stage a little bit on my experience with this game and my introduction to Gilbert. And I think it also is a time that we should have a little recognition for the rest of the team. Now, the rest of the team consists of two developers, Matthew Collins, Harry Martin, the project director, John Krantz, editing and proofreading by Gilbert himself and Paula DiPauli, and a map designed by Matthew Collins. And I think anyone who's taken a look at this map can agree that it's a great map. It's very good looking. There were also additional graphics completed by Knut Grunitz, and there were some playtesters, although this is not a very long playtester list compared to some I've seen. And the Vassal module was created by Rob Doan. Pete Manning and Rob Doan also show up in both the playtester list and the research list, so I assume they were heavily involved. And often playtesters are almost as important as developers and designers in some ways, because they're the ones who are going to find the mistakes and the bugs and really kick the tires on the game. So I think overall it's a great game, and if you haven't played it, I think it's a great time to pick it up, especially with the anniversary of 1776 coming up next year. It's a good one to have in your back pocket for a very comprehensive view of the entire American Revolutionary War.
By the way, before we get into this portion of the game, let me just note that there's a couple of really important and potentially pretty annoying parts of the setup here. So you'll notice how big that stack is in Boston. If you don't bring in your reinforcement phase, make sure you look at the reinforcement chart on turn 1, because you get more units in your reinforcements than you just have in the setup. On top of that, there's a piece of errata that is this setup portion here, where you are actually supposed to have a garrison in each part of the Caribbean. So if you fail to do that, you're going to be 2 garrison units short in the Caribbean, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense if until you get there much later in the game, but it's just something you gotta read the errata chart on. Alright, so one of the big things here is these reinforcements. What they allow you to do is to at least attack with 1 to 2 odds. So you have you've got your loyalist guy that you can bring in, and you've got your 2 Brits, and then you have your different units. So you could use Howe for his +3. You have obviously these 4 guys for their garrison purposes, but then you could attack with at least 3 strength points, which gives you 1 to 2 odds. And then you can kind of overcome those odds with your die roll modifiers. So now, theoretically, with this force here, with Howe's little force, what we should be able to do is take on this unit here who's a 6 with only 3 strength points. That's the idea anyway. So what we could do here is now activate Howe and march on Worcester. Now you can do this specifically because it is exactly 1 movement point away. If it were any further, we wouldn't be able to do it because we just landed with these reinforcements. But because we have the reinforcements, we can immediately march on Worcester. And so this is one of those unique situations where they don't get a chance to evade battle, and we immediately will roll the combat. And throughout this series, we're going to have the British be the colored die and the Americans be the white die. So let's just zoom out a little bit here so we can see the die roll. And, well, the next thing before we roll the dice, let's consult our actual, where is it? Let's consult the charts and tables for the battle. So we know we have a good leader who is a +3. And then we also have, let's see if I can get this in focus. So we have the good leader who's a +3. And then we also are at 1 to 2 odds. So that's a -1. But then we have our extra +1 from our tactical commander, Ferguson. And we can play a battle card, which gives us an additional +2. So we'll play the battle card. So now we have +3 -1. +1 gets us back up to a +3, and then +2, which gives us +5. We are also doing regulars versus militia, which is another +1. So we're actually at +6 here. And so I think that's the best. That's as good as we can get, basically. So +6 because of all of our bonuses, and the enemy is just militia, and we are regulars. And so we are rolling on the 3 to 7 column for the British, and so are the Americans. But because they're getting a +6, they're pretty much guaranteed to win this, hopefully, unless they roll really bad. All right, so British are colored dice, Americans are white dice. The Americans roll a 4, and the British roll a 9. A 9 goes up to the maximum of a 12, which is 2-star. And then the Americans roll the 4, which goes up to I think that's straight up. All right, I don't think they're getting anything here. Oh, well, they get a +1 for 2 to 1. So they get a 5, so that's 3 stars. So 2-star is greater than the 3 stars. And in this case, when we're doing a standard battle, the winner is the number result, obviously, because the numbers always trump the stars. If the result is a number plus a star, it trumps a known lone number. In this case, we got a 2-star, so if that was 2-star against a 2, the 2-star would win. So the British win the battle, and then the amount of losses essentially goes against the result against the enemy and denotes how many strength points they lose. So if you roll a 2, then the enemy loses 2. So this force here is now down to a 4. So they've lost 2 off of that battle. Let's see if I can find a 4. There's a 4. So he's down to a 4. And he's forced to retreat. So he'll saunter off towards Springfield. And the British take this magazine, and they can actually flip this magazine. It's a special rule on Rule 1. Normally they're destroyed, but in this case he can flip it to his own side, which for obvious reasons is way better. So now he holds that magazine, and he takes no losses. So you can see how important all those bonuses were for successfully completing that. And that is his action pulse done. We only get 2 action pulses on turn 1. Normally you get 4. Okay, so red's down to a 1. And that is the end of the first action pulse. Let's just go take a quick look at what the action pulse and the other trackers look like. So up here, you have your action pulses. You've got some spots to hold some leaders. I don't actually have all this quite set up yet, but you can see here there's some spots where you can put cards that'll affect political will once you draw them. So, like for example, if once we draw like Declaration of Independence, then we would put that on the American side in their card box over here. And that indicates that that card is in play. So although they had to use a card, which for obvious reasons is expensive, and they've now used both of their battle cards, one to get their tactical commander and the other to win the battle, that's a good use of their resources, because you do get to refresh those cards next year, but it's better to use them early, I think, at least in year 1. You don't want to be sitting on the cards in year 2, because you're just going to refresh them. You only have 4 turns to really use them before you get to the next year. So you might as well pop them as early as you can. And by moving that magazine out of there, that's a big help, and it's a good start to the war. So a victory at essentially the Battle of Lexington and Concord here. The last part of that retreat is that the retreating force gets a D-star put on them. So if they were forced to retreat again, they are going to get destroyed. So this is a very dangerous situation now for the Americans to be in, and they really need to get rallied. Now, rallying is pretty important in this case, because you don't want to retreat twice with your D-star. If you already have been D-starred, then you're going to take extra losses, essentially, an extra step loss. So theoretically, they could be almost wiped out before they even get to do anything, which obviously would be ideal for the British. So now we move to the American action pulse, and the Americans here are definitely trying to get that D-star removed by taking a rally action as soon as possible. And I'm just trying to remember exactly where you do the rallying. I don't know if that's a special rule or what. Oh, okay. They're just rallied at the beginning of the player's next action pulse. So I guess D-stars really only matter when you're the attacker, or if you get a double turn done to you. So in this case, this D-star now goes away. because it's done at no cost. I guess I wasn't clear on that. It's not really an action, it's just a default thing that happens. So what the Americans want to do here is activate Benedict Arnold and get his leadership into play so that they're not at such long odds next time. And I think the best way to do that is just to, roll for his activation. He rolls 5, so he only gets 2 movement points, but he only needs 2 movement points to get there, mercifully. So he's going to take his guys with him, and he will move into there. I think I accidentally flipped that. Maybe I didn't. I think he's only supposed to have one point there, if I remember right. Yep, he's only supposed to have 1 point. And then there's also free actions we could take. I don't really think any of them are necessary right now. Yeah, I don't really think there's any free actions that would be beneficial to us right now. So we'll just leave it as is. Alright, so now we have to roll initiative. And initiative is just rolling and comparing the results of your die, whoever rolled higher, basically. So the British roll higher, so they get the next action pulse. So the British now are probably going to try to run down these guys here. Now, they won't be quite as advantaged anymore. So that is a bit of a risk. Now that they're kind of protected by that guy. What they could do is rotate over and kill that guy in Newport. Nothing else is really in range. But that's one option. So they could do that. They can't really cut the line of communication in any way, so there's not really a chance of doing that. I don't know. This is kind of a weird situation to be in here. Well, I think in this case it'll actually pay to be cautious with the British here. So it would be one thing if they could guarantee themselves the battle win. But now that the Americans have a +3 on their side as well, it becomes a lot less likely that they can do that. And they don't have enough troops to surround the Americans. They could try it. And it is possible to win this battle. But they would have to roll well, and leaving it up to the dice is pretty risky in this case, I think. But I think it's, discretion is the better part of valor in this case. So one thing we could think about doing here is trying to swing in behind them as the British with Johnson's force. So let's roll to activate Johnson. He activates with his full movement points. And actually, he could get pretty damn far downriver, too, because he can go all the way down to here and potentially draw off the American forces. He could also go ahead and leave a marker at Albany if he wanted to. Or he can just basically threaten the Hudson River Valley, being able to move up and down that pretty easily. So that could be their free move. They could also bring down reinforcements from Halifax for free. So he could bring down their Halifax guy. I don't know if you're allowed to leave Halifax completely uncontested like that. I gotta check if there's any rule against leaving that. I don't think there is. So I think you can bring down the Halifax guy without causing any problems here. It just obviously won't have a defense, but I don't know if that's a big deal. There's nothing saying you can't leave that undefended, so I think we shall. And naval transport like that is always free, or at least that's my interpretation of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Anywho, the Americans can now go, and I guess they've got no choice. Well, they do have the option to try to assault Ticonderoga, so maybe we try to activate for Ticonderoga. He gets a 5, so that's 2 movement points, and I think Ticonderoga is exactly 2 movement points away. Based on the terrain effects chart, you can see here that the dotted lines indicate that it's a wilderness or trails, so that costs you 2 movement points. So Ethan Allen is headed over here to try to attack this garrison, which is lightly defended only with a single garrison marker. And now I have to figure out if that automatically initiates combat or not, if they're besieged. Okay, so it's basically a -3 on their D12 for this battle. And he's got a 2, and he's going against the less than 1. So he does have a pretty good chance here, because he's got a 2, and the less than 1 column is a lot weaker. Now, if you're in a fortress, it's just -3 to the attacker. But here we have 2-to-1 odds, basically. Well, greater than 2-to-1, but it rounds down. So 2-to-1 odds is a +1. We get a +0 from his D rating. And we get a -3 from attacker. So we're sitting at a -2, but we could use a battle card. Battle card gets us up to even odds, so we'll use the battle card. So now we're at even odds. Oopsies. Should get my dice tower out, I guess, huh? They were in the Catskills. And these guys were obviously right here. Okay, so the British roll a 3, Americans roll a 9. So a 3 on the less than 1 column is a no result. And a 9 -0, because we're at even odds, a 9 is a 1. So they are able to take that fortress and kill the unit there. So that's a pretty huge achievement. Again, got to use those battle cards while you have them early in the war. So that is what we will end the first season of the game on. The British have driven back the rebels, and they've let themselves into Springfield now, or forced the rebels to retreat into Springfield. They've taken the magazine in Worcester, but in response, Ethan Allen has led a daring raid against Fort Ticonderoga, managed to take that fort. And meanwhile, in the west, we have Johnson making his way kind of down into the Hudson River Valley. And so we're set up for an exciting summer of campaigning here. But that's where I'll leave it for today. This was just a quick primer into the game. Future episodes will be a little bit faster paced and just try to blow through as many turns as I can each time. But you can kind of see that this game is a very strategic game. There's a lot of thinking that goes into each move. But there's not a lot of counters to worry about. So even though it is a very vast and expansive game, you don't have to do a ton of management of the counters, which is merciful because you could make a game about the Revolution be very, very detailed and essentially unplayable. But this game is quite nice to play. Now, obviously, the pace is relatively slow. It's going to take me all of that 16-hour mark that's printed on the box to play through this campaign. Probably longer because I have to talk and think at the same time, which tends to slow me down. But I hope you enjoyed at least a little taste of the early part of this campaign. And if you are interested in the game, check out Gilbert Collins' YouTube channel, and you can kind of see him play the later part of the campaign where he starts from the French coming in. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Till next time, see ya.